Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole Angemi and Maria Q. Kane.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. On today's episode, we have our friend, retired NYPD Sergeant and host of True Crime with the Sarge on YouTube, Joe Giacalone, with us. And we're going to be talking with him today about the latest updates on some cases we've been following, including Kouri Richins' recent guilty verdict and Justin Timberlake's DUI video that's been going viral. And we'll also get into the latest with Nancy Guthrie and Rex Heuermann. All that and more on today's episode. Hi, Joe. What's up? Welcome.
Hey, Nicole. How are you and Maria? How's everything, guys?
We're great. Good. We're excited to have you. We've been listening to your YouTube show, and so we want you to talk about some of these cases with our listeners.
Okay.
Yeah. And last time we were on your show, the best thing ever happened to me, which is that you called my mom a whack job, which...
Wacko. It's wacko.
Which I've been dealing with this lady for 31 years, and I felt very seen that day.
Yeah, talk about... she set me up, though, right? Because it was...
She
was showing me photos of this other guy, girl actor, was taking bodies from it, and then she shows me something. I'm like, yeah, this guy's a wacko. She's like, that's from my house. It's like I fell right into the trap.
And I'm never going to let it go.
Yeah, I know. I keep on saying that. I'm never going to live that one down.
My kids are the best thing ever. Though.
You know how the kids are always like, you're dragging. I'm like, oh, I'm going to drag this one.
Yeah, I'm going to have some carpet burns.
All right. Let's get started with the Kouri Richins case. This is like, all right, Ray, why don't you talk about it a little just to keep everybody updated with it?
Well, for our listeners, we're going to do a deep dive where we break down every single detail of the story, but we don't have time like that today because it's going to be like a 4-hour episode in itself. But this is the woman we talked about last week. She was just convicted, found guilty of poisoning her husband, and then she wrote a children's book about grieving a dead parent, which I think anybody could agree is just so ridiculous. So what are your thoughts on this case overall?
Well, I mean, you talk about at the initial stages of this, right? She almost got away with it in that respect. I mean, it took a while for law enforcement to kind of catch up to this whole thing. But I do think there were people chirping in the background. So like we're seeing friends now coming out and doing interviews in the mainstream media that, we kind of thought she did it from the beginning, right? So I think law enforcement had a little bit of help in that respect. And listen, folks, we know that most people are victimized by someone they know. I mean, we're talking close to like 70% of the time. So I think they probably looked at her pretty closely in the beginning, but then it kind of fell off the radar. But this whole thing with the fentanyl and the medical examiner, I think came back as it was 5 times the dosage that would require to kill somebody. So it kind of set off some red flags.
Yeah, why did it take a full year to arrest her? Was it just due lack of evidence?
Yeah, I think, well, listen, sometimes you have these cases where you're dealing with the medical examiner and they're saying, listen, we know fentanyl was killing so many people. And then, and most of them are going down as accidental overdoses. So law enforcement has to be kind of careful when the medical examiner comes out with either an undetermined or accidental or, suicide kind of thing. It kind of just sits on the back burner until there is something that kind of pushes you forward. Undetermined cases are the worst to have to investigate because basically the medical examiner is telling you, I have no idea how this person died. So now it's up to you, the police, to figure it out for me. And sometimes that's not easy if you didn't do a very good initial crime scene, in regards to photographs and all the other things that go along with it. And you can point right to Philadelphia in that respect. We know, those cases that case that's going on there with, the former school teacher. So
Ellen Greenberg.
Yeah.
Ellen Greenberg. Yeah, thank you. I had a little brain spasm there for a second.
So when you were working, because what year did you retire around?
I retired on October 31st, 2012, on Halloween during the storm of the century. So it kind of summed up my career.
That's amazing. So when you were working, was fentanyl a big deal, or because I know it is now?
Yeah.
It's
no,
crazy.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, I grew up in the police department during the crack epidemic. So I got on the police department in June of 1992. And we saw the height of murders and all the other things in like 1994. And then we started seeing that progressive downward trend. But yeah, the crack epidemic was absolutely insane, and it's unlike, and I've talked about this people, and I don't think the public really gets this. Drug dealing even has changed dramatically. Drug dealing used to be get the person hooked, get them to keep on coming back so I can make more money. Now these guys are selling this stuff that's just killing people and then moving on to the next victim. It's absolutely insane how this has changed. And it doesn't seem that anybody even wants to talk about that.
Well, what's interesting is with the fentanyl thing is that you could have legal fentanyl that's given to patients that need it, that have like end stage cancer and have just severe pain. But then there's illegal fentanyl, which, like you're saying, people on the streets buy these pills usually because they're addicted to heroin or they have a prescription drug addiction. And they don't realize that they're buying counterfeit pills because they look exactly like a Percocet or something like that. And these people that are making these pills are putting so much fentanyl, like you don't need that much to be 5 times over what would kill you.
Right.
So if he was just a person, let's say and not even saying he was a drug addict, but a lot of times people just get a knee surgery and then they get a prescription for Percocets and all of a sudden they're addicted to it. They can't get any more from their doctor and they start buying it off the street. He easily could have had an accidental death.
Yeah.
They
And
happen all the time.
exactly. And it's actually one of the things. I mean, I just had a recent hospital stay and they want to give you all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'll deal with the pain, let it go away, because I've seen it even in policing where people, like you said, just went to the hospital or had a bad injury and they got this drug. And then all of a sudden, it's like their whole lives are ruined. So I learned to deal with certain pains. And I don't even like taking like Tylenol or nothing. But, the issue that comes down to is maybe I'm just too much of an extreme. But the issue that comes down to is, yes, these things happen. I'm sure that was talked about in policing because, in this case, because I mean, so many people were dying of this fentanyl overdose and they were buying this stuff off the street or getting it from friends or going to a party and didn't have any idea what they were about to do. And it to me, it's mind boggling that people still think like, well, you know what, I'm going to try it. It's not going to happen to me. And that's unfortunately what we saw. We saw this huge spike over the last few years.
Yeah, what bothered me in this trial was I feel like the defense was trying to paint him as this drug addict because he took weed gummies. People that take weed gummies are not always doing something stronger.
Yeah, well, you know why? Because marijuana and all those other things has that gateway drug kind of connotation to it, where people start off with it because it's a light kind of thing, and but eventually they graduate to these other things. Listen, I mean, I've seen the extremes on both sides, and I haven't read the research on if that's true or not. But we do know that if you're taking heroin or these other things, there's a good possibility that these things are going to be laced with fentanyl now. So the word is out there, and I think education is really important to try to let people know this. But unfortunately, there's so many people on hard times that it just doesn't matter.
So, if you were investigating this case with Kouri Richins, would you find her behavior abnormal for somebody that just lost her husband suddenly in this tragic way, mother of 3 kids? She's now on her own with millions of dollars in assets that could be overwhelming, and she decides to throw a party, doesn't really seem that bothered, immediately talking about selling their house. Just strikes me as unusual.
Yeah, well, you have to remember, Maria, like, my former life, I find everything unusual. With certain people, I look at everybody with a raised eyebrow when you see some of these things because, motives run the gamut, but love, money, and drugs are probably the top 3 out there. So when you start to see kind of behavior like that, especially, when you're dealing with life insurance policies and all those other things, I mean, there were times where we had cases that if you had a life insurance policy and you thought it was under suspicious means, you would just notify the life insurance company and say, listen, we're investigating this case. Don't pay it out yet because we don't know what's going on, which usually causes quite the alarm when you get the phone call from the family saying, we're trying to get the money. We can't get it. And he's like, oh, so it's a strange behavior that people have. And unfortunately, people deal with grief different ways too. So it's difficult sometimes to pinpoint a behavior that would say, that's something to examine. But I think that, most detectives, if not all of them, are very skeptical of everybody when it comes to these things.
I feel like the life insurance is just the number one telltale sign. Like, this lady has multiple policies she took out on another person. Why are we even allowed to take policies out on other people?
And some things, sometimes the person doesn't even have to be notified that they're out there. That's the
Yes.
really crazy thing about it. So yeah, that's red flags when you start dealing with that, especially when somebody who is pretty much in decent health and it doesn't really have a reputation of engaging in risky behavior and those kind of things. But that's why victimology is extremely important in cases where you dig down deep into somebody's background to try to find things out that nobody either A, didn't know or nobody talked about. But now that the person's gone, sometimes they're willing to come forward. And that's really a huge part of the investigation, besides the crime scene and all the other stuff. It's the things in the background that the people on TV don't see, and those, CSI movies where it's 45 minutes with 3 commercials, right? But all those other things are really important when you're building a case. And that's why we try to even change the mindset and telling detectives that this isn't a homicide investigation. This isn't a suicide investigation. It's a death investigation. And to keep that in the mindset, because this way you avoid things like confirmation bias. And that's something really important, because if you don't, you can end up somebody getting away with it.
So, yeah, and that could be said about a lot of the other cases that we're going to, or a few of the other cases we're going to talk about today, that it's really important for police to walk in with, like, try not to listen to the noise of what got reported in this and that, because the investigation could be botched kind of from the beginning if you don't handle it properly, and then it's always going to have doubt in the people's minds because of that.
Well, and not only that, you provide defense attorneys with openings to try to, do something. Say like, look, detective, even you thought it was a suicide. What changed your mind? Who changed your mind? So it's really important, especially now in today's age. I'm kind of glad I didn't have to do this kind of behavior, this kind of work under the microscope of the police departments do now with
Right.
social media, where you got
Oh,
people
yeah.
camped out and in lawn chairs and ordering pizzas and all this other crazy stuff. So I couldn't imagine that. But sometimes the police department also needs to learn from these lessons and take better control of these crime scenes and just block them out. And that's the only way you can stop.
Well, I think we are seeing that firsthand with the Nancy Guthrie investigation. That's
Yeah.
been a total miss.
Well, that, if you think about Brian Kohlberger, a lot of these cases. But you know what, though? Unfortunately, the police department needs to learn a valuable lesson from that case. And that is, you hold the crime scene until you are completely done. None of this in and out, putting up crime scene tape, taking it down, putting it up, taking it down. It's a bad look, because once you let it go, it's gone forever. It's too
Did-
contaminated.
Because you guys can hold a scene as long as you want, right?
Oh yeah, there's no rule on that, and especially and if you take, I don't know if we're going to segue to the Guthrie case, but that case specifically, you have a house where only one person had access to it. You didn't. It's not like, in New York City, you dealt with apartment buildings, and you can't, wipe out an entire apartment building for weeks on end because you had 100 people living in it. This was a house all by itself. No other people needed access to the home. It would have been so easy to just close down the house, cordon off the entire piece of property, park that temporary headquarters vehicle right out front. You have your gatekeeper. I mean, all of these things I'm talking about are really investigation 101. And unfortunately, we didn't see that happen. And I blame the sheriff for that, because the buck stops with him. He's the boss. And, instead he's out there, doing media interviews. Listen, they have to stop that behavior too. You could do your media interviews, but not during the initial stages, because these things change so wildly, so quick, that it comes to a point where if the boss is talking about it and now we have to walk him or her back, who's there to do that? The boss has already told us something. That's a bad look.
And what's the need? Like, really, does the public even need to know any of those details?
The only thing the public is that it basically is required from the police department is if there's a danger to them. And that's the only thing that they're entitled to. They're not entitled to anything else. And in this case, he didn't make that statement until 42 days later or something, where he said,
Oh my God.
oh, they could strike again, right? So,
It was
listen.
like last week he just said it.
Yeah,
And
because I think today's 50 or 51 days, but I think it was 42 days into this. And I remember throwing stuff at the TV when I'm hearing this, because now, a month and change into this is not the time to tell people, hide your kids and hide your wife. I mean, it's not the time to do this. It just, yeah, I always said if I had hair, I'd pull it out. But it's just frustrating, because in 2026, we shouldn't be dealing with certain things anymore. I mean, we have, of course, local standards, but there are even national standards, or best practices, I should call them, because we really don't have a national police force. But best practices put out by, NIJ, the National Institute of Justice, and all these other things that we can. It's free training, and we still can't do it because I understand training is costs a lot of money in policing, but come on.
Do you think it has? So you worked in New York, so you were busy every single day with this kind of
It,
stuff, right? I mean,
oh
you're in
God,
a
yeah.
busy department, one of the busiest, if not the busiest in the entire country. And do you think it's just a lack of experience? Because it's the same with Idaho. It's just like they didn't even have any murders for 10 years or something in that particular town. I know Tucson's got a little bit more, but it, is it just because they don't do it every day? They don't really know how to approach it correctly?
Well, that definitely plays a role in it. But like I said before, training can help you get over some of those humps. And here's the other issue with what I have with Pima County. You have a major police department not too far away in Phoenix, where you could just say, "Hey guys, I need 5 of your best homicide investigators to come over and help get this thing jump started." Right? I mean, there are other resources. There are mutual agreements that you have with different surround. I think Tucson's not too far either. So you have some cities that are nearby that experience violence at a certain level, that have people who are, that might have investigated 10, 15, 100 homicides over their career. Why not just tap into that resource when you don't have it? And then when you don't do that, I start asking questions because it really isn't about me. It's about solving the case. It's about finding this elderly woman who is believed to be kidnapped and bringing her home safely. Who cares who helps out and does it? Put your ego and stuff aside and just work the case and get any help that you can get from wherever law enforcement agencies willing to help. And I guarantee you, if that ask went out, they would have done it.
I
Can
feel
you?
like too they were shitting on everyday people submitting tips because they were like, we don't want to sort through all of these tips that are probably including no important information. And then the Guthrie family over the weekend just released a statement. It was like, please tell them anything because you don't know what could be significant.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. So, I mean, listen, when you have $1 million as reward money, you're going to bring people out of the woodworks anyway. So, for a short time in my career, I was the commanding officer of the NYPD's Crime Stoppers unit, and I can understand when you get a lot of Crime Stopper tips coming in. Most people have very good intentions, but you have a lot of people that want to give you theories. They want to do this. They want to, I had a vision. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Um, so, and once again, I mean, cops are generally skeptical on everything. So if I have somebody calling me up and saying, "Listen, I had a dream last night that," and you're just sitting there going, "Oh my God." But you have to write this stuff down and it has to be followed out. And then of course you got to call the detective squad and say, "Listen, I got this woman. She called, she saw this, she had a dream." And they'd be like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" I'm like, "Yeah, no," but you have to answer out every one of those tips because when you don't, you now open up the door to there are other people that could have been involved in this homicide or your kidnapping and not my client. You did not exclude all others. So you have to answer out every one of these things. And when you think about this, the not having the hindsight of realizing that this was going to turn into an international story. You have the mother of an NBC Today show host. You have, the TMZ factor that gets thrown into this. Another media company, local media that really didn't get involved too much, right? I think they did the right thing in respect that they got this and they said, "Screw this, we're not touching it with a 10-foot pole." Like, how do you not know that this was going to turn into a giant mess? And and then that's the bottom line. Like, I know common sense is not that common, but geez, if you're running a police department, and guys, this isn't some like podunk police department. I know it kind of gets labeled that, but there's like 550 deputies, or in this department. It's not a small department as far as departments go. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there are over 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. 18,000.
Yeah, that's
And
wow.
most have fewer than 10 sworn officers. So if you have a department with 500 plus people, that's huge. So that meaning that you have funding, you have training, you have experience, you have all the things that go along with it. And not to see any of that come together, to me, is a lack of leadership.
Well, I was actually going to ask you that. Can you explain to us the difference? Because I feel like it's almost like the coroner system versus the medical examiner system, where like one of them's an elected position and one of them is
Mhm.
one you actually have to get hired for and even promote into. Like I know that you do in New York, but for the leadership of Pima County, he's an elected official, right? Like he didn't actually promote to that position.
Right. And he actually only won in a recount. He only won by a few hundred votes during a recount. So it was really close. But yes, so different areas have an elected police chief or police sheriff or what have you, whatever you want to call them. They all mean the same thing and the day's over. But, the problem is that it's always partisan politics a lot of times. And you run on a Republican or a Democratic ticket. And then, listen, when you have like New York City, where it is appointed by the mayor, it's still a political position, right? You're still going to be beholden to the mayor, so to speak. But in policing, the politics, as far as I'm concerned, should never play a role in this. And the reason is your job is to prevent crime and prevent future crime and harm to people. Who cares if you're a Republican or a Democrat, whatever you are? I don't care. Do the law enforcement job. It shouldn't affect any other thing, but we see this struggle every day with the immigration issues and the fight with ISIS and all of those. So you're seeing the mayors of these cities like New York telling the police commissioner, like, we're not doing this. So it's still an extremely difficult political position to be in. And that's why you'll see a couple of these police commissioners will quit in the next couple of months because it just cannot go on that long with a fight is just happening. I mean, I give Jessica Tisch, the police commissioner in New York City, a lot of credit because I would have told I would have had 2 words for the mayor and they wouldn't have been happy birthday. So and I would have been out the door. So I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, patience is something that I lack these days.
Do you think that I mean, I don't want to make an overall statement because I'm sure there's some sheriffs that are really awesome throughout the country and stuff. I just wonder if just because I see my husband going through the promotion process of like it weeding out like the people that aren't doing as well on the test, and you have to take, well, at least in a civil service kind of a promotion system, but there's a certain level of training that you have to have and knowledge that you have to have for each position as you go forward in a department. So if he's just getting elected, it's like, is he required to be keeping up on like continuing education and training, or is that not really happening because he just keeps getting put in the position?
Yeah, that really doesn't happen at certain levels. So the training kind of stops at certain points. And one of my frustrations was like when I first got promoted to sergeant and you're running a desk at a precinct. I mean, so you see some of these movies where, everything's nice and calm and people walk into the police station or whatever and everything is like, oh, yes, sure, hi, and this and that. I mean, I've always threatened to write like a screenplay for this stuff because you're in there, you got kids banging basketballs off the walls, yelling and screaming, people throwing up. I mean, it's an absolute nut house. And then you're there at the desk and you're responsible for everything that happens inside and outside of the precinct. And you're basically the quarterback. And then you're making all these entries, you're doing the thing. Narcotics comes in with 20 bodies to what do you call that? It raid all these people in there. And then you got the captain saying, hey, like, why are you always complaining that there's something going on? Because you see him sit back in the chair for a minute. And you're like, it's not so bad. Be like, yeah, you did this 30 years ago. It's a little different today. And so, yes, it changes dramatically. And some of the best bosses that I've worked for are the ones that really did police work. You have so many people that get promoted, whether it's in the fire department or the police department, who never really did the job. They were a good studier and they learn and they read the book and they get promoted. And then next thing you know, they're your boss and they're telling you what to do and they've never done it. So civil service doesn't happen in every department either. Most of it is done the old fashioned way, nepotism and cronyism. And, that's just the nature of the beast. So it's a very strange kind of career or environment that you deal with depending on the actual locations. And like you mentioned before, the difference between the coroner's system and the medical examiners, right? Like night and day. Same thing happens in policing.
That's really interesting. So do you think with the like for the Idaho case, for example, they kind of, from our perspective, didn't seem like they were on top of it. And then one day they said, oh, we got this guy. And it was like shocking how they were kind of doing all this stuff behind the scenes. Do you think that in this particular case, they know a lot more than they're telling us? And if so, if that had anything to do with him not taking help from search people doing a search group at all, or having cadaver sniffing dogs or anything like that. Like, it doesn't seem like he was really looking for her. And is it possible that they just think that she's not out there, like she's somewhere else?
Okay, so you got a lot of things there. So I'm going to try to remember all of them because you got a lot of good points here. But yes, the police department always knows a lot more than they're going to tell everybody. I always say they say everything and nothing all in the same sentence. And it's something that you have to really pay attention to as they're talking, because a lot of times they can give you clues. And in Moscow with Idaho, we saw something a little bit different. We saw a good symbiotic relationship between them and the FBI. We're hearing from the very beginning of this case that he didn't even want the FBI in there, and then things were not really that good, right? I don't know if that's true or not. I'm only going by news reports. But from what I'm seeing is something that is kind of out of like, what are we doing here? And for instance, I'll give you a for instance. We have yet to see a coordinated search of the entire property line. And I'm talking about a line search or a grid search or a zone search where you break it up into 4 quadrants and you see the detectives or the cops, whoever it is, shoulder to shoulder, walking the entire property. We never saw that. My friend Cheryl McCollum, that she actually said, and I have to give her credit because she goes, it's more like an Easter egg hunt that they were doing. They're walking around, they're like, oh, what's that? Oh, a pair of gloves. Oh, what's that? Another pair of gloves. We find gloves 2.5 miles away. I mean, come on. As soon as I heard that, I'd be like, guys, please, enough with this. You
Right.
found a pair of gloves 2.5 miles away from the crime scene means absolutely nothing, right? Why didn't they? Do you remember them like poking around, like I would say, like the witch's brew in the septic tank? Like if you really thought she's in there, you should have brought in the truck and drained it.
Right? Like, what is happening?
I told Cheryl too, as far as like the pacemaker being in her, I dropped my Aura ring one day when I was doing work on my house, and I immediately Googled, how do I find a Bluetooth thing? And I downloaded some app and I found it in my backyard in a pile of leaves. They waited weeks to look. This lady literally has something that you could track inside of her body. And in my opinion, they just waited a really long time to even look into that.
Yeah, from what way we learned is it's a little different than like your cell phone, this thing with this
Yeah.
pacemaker. But ironically, about 2 days before we heard this, I said, I wouldn't, I said, I have something like, there's so much craziness going on in this case. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we saw them take a drone and put an Apple Watch on it and fly it over the thing. And then 2 days later, they got a helicopter up there. And I'm like, guys, I was only kidding about this, right? But where are the bloodhounds? Where are the cadaver dogs? So this was part of the other
Yes.
thing, Nicole, right? I mean, why are they resisting bringing in cadaver dogs at this point? It doesn't make any sense. They've didn't allow volunteer searchers, and when they did, volunteer searchers did it on their own. They found a backpack right in a culvert somewhere, and you just kind of say to yourself, guys, if you don't have enough people and you can organize the group, right, and vet them out, get their names and their identifications. I mean, this not like that's never been done before. As long as you know who the people are who are searching, right? You've identified them. Maybe you do a quick background check to make sure they're not wanted on warrants and all the other things that go along with it, and then use it. I mean, New York City, we didn't have to do any of that because we had so many cops. It didn't matter. But once again, reach out to your law enforcement partners that are surrounding counties and see, hey, listen, I need a couple of 100 people. Let's ask Tucson. Let's ask, the state police. Let's ask everybody and see if we can get people in there. I guarantee if they would have called the state police, they would have sent in a dozen cars and, Tucson and Phoenix and all these other things, because this is a major case and everybody wants to have it solved. They want to find this woman, right? Isn't that your goal? To find this woman?
So even if they had strong evidence to suggest that she was in Mexico or something, right? That she was no longer there, should they still do searches like that on the property if they really believe that she's not there at all, just to get other evidence to try to find the people?
Yeah, so let's take that to 2 things. First of all, they should have done the entire search of the property the first day or 2 there, looking for any clues into this. And how do I know that they don't have the evidence that she's in another country? Is because if they can prove that, the FBI would have taken over this case already, because that would have been the federal nexus. So when you have a kidnapping, see, kidnapping has its own federal statute. And there are a couple of times where the feds can just step in automatically. Right now, we haven't triggered that. One of them is across state lines. One of them is across, international lines. And there might be something to even do with the fact that if you can prove that the person is no longer with us and they've done some of these other things, it can be a federal nexus. And since the feds haven't planted their flag yet, they don't have that evidence to prove otherwise. But one of the things that I did see, and a couple people picked up on it, is about a week or two ago, the federal prosecutors went through the crime scene. So that to me was a good sign that this might be headed that way. And the reason why I feel that way is because I don't really have much faith in what's going on with Pima County. And I think the feds would be a breath of fresh air in regards to this. Because listen, the feds are always lurking. It's like you have, that filter where they take the picture and, Jesus comes up behind you when you're doing something bad. That's what that's what it's like, but they're like, hey, what's going on over there? They're always looking. But I always had great relationships with the feds, especially when we were in cold case. We closed a lot of cases because of the feds. So, unlike television where the feds and the cops are always fighting, I guess apparently it does happen, but I've never experienced that.
So legally, the local or state police don't have to turn it over unless there is hard evidence that it is a federal crime.
Right. Yeah. Television has really done a bad job on this, right? Because in television, the FBI shows up and says, FBI, we're in charge. There are only a few times that the FBI can actually take over. And, terrorism, kidnapping across state lines, there's a whole bunch of things. They can be invited in, and it's always a good thing to invite them in because they have basically a pocketbook that is bottomless. They have all these tools and all these computers and all these, information that the local police departments don't have. So bringing in the feds is always step one if you're really interested in solving a case that you might not have any control over. So when you're dealing with a situation like this, bringing in the feds is a good thing. And the issue that comes down to is just remember, like we have joint terrorism task force, we have joint bank robbery task force. The feds really aren't allowed to do regular law enforcement work unless they are partnered up with local police, right? That's not their job. But if the local police invite them in, then it's a different story. So that's really how they get involved. Like I said, for instance, when we had the kids in was it Brooklyn or Queens, where they threw the bombs into the crowds, or whatever, became an instant federal case after a day or so ago, and the federal prosecutors already charged these guys with terrorism statutes, right? That's how fast it happens. And I tell people, do you think that the cops are going to be like, oh no, I want to do all this work. Let's keep the feds out. Are you crazy? No way. That only happens in Hollywood. That doesn't happen in real life. Your job is to get this case solved, bring the person home safely, and then move on to the next one. I mean, that's what you want to do. And if I can do that quicker because somebody else helped me, great.
I need you to watch this new show that's on HBO. It's called DTF St. Louis. The crime lab / police department in the show might be the most ridiculous thing you will ever see in your life.
Boy, yeah, some of these TV shows are just like, I get some of my students always ask me, oh, did you see this? Did you see that? And I'm just like, no, I did not see it.
Exactly. Like
It'll drive you absolutely nuts how ridiculous this setup is. This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Guys, this week's high-profile death dissection is on Nicholas Brendan. He has a cause of death that, we don't know exactly what his cause of death is yet, actually, but he has a medical history that we haven't talked about yet in The Gross Room, which is pretty interesting. So we get into that this week. We also have our YouTube live every week, which is, I really look forward to it. It's really fun.
It's really awesome talking to you guys and getting your immediate feedback and just laughing about stories or talking about the most ridiculous things ever.
Yeah, I mean, I like that's what the good thing about the live, because we have actual interaction with you guys as it's happening, and it's cool because sometimes we'll be talking about a case that's active and one of the listeners will just be like, no, they just said this, and it's cool. It's really awesome. So check that out.
Head over to thegrossroom.com now to sign up.
So another case that we wanted to talk to you about was Rex Heuermann. We know that you guys you and Laura Engel and the Sinister podcast, you guys have all been covering this case a lot.
Yeah.
Is that a case where, because were all the bodies found in New York, did that cross state lines at all? Or is that a case that would go to the FBI just because of the nature of it?
Yeah, the only thing, okay, so the first question is, there's some jurisdictional issues in between New York counties, right? So we have Nassau County, Suffolk County, where some of the body's parts were found in Nassau and some of them were found in Suffolk. So that becomes a bit of an issue, right? So we know that Gary Ridgway learned about putting people in different states because it creates a huge jurisdictional issue. The question that comes down to is Rex Heuermann, did he do this intentionally? We don't know, but we also know that he has also not been charged with some of the cases. And we do know, surprisingly, that Peaches, Tanya Jackson, formerly known as Peaches, and her daughter, which was Baby Doe, which was found in Suffolk County, Tatiana Dykes, has been charged Andrew Dykes, the father, has been charged in the mother's death, but not the baby's death, right? So that was a big surprise. And I still think there's some big issues with that case going forward. But, we still have the Asian male doe that hasn't been identified, but we do know that Othram is working on that. We have Karen Vagata, whose body reports were found in Davis Park out in Suffolk County and other parts found in Nassau County, right? So we have against this jurisdictional issue, and no one's been charged in her case either. But we've had 10 sets of human remains found on the northern side of the Ocean Parkway. And there was one set of human remains found on the south part of Ocean Parkway. And that was the remains of Shannon Gilbert, who kicked off this entire investigation, right? So, while the police were looking for Shannon Gilbert, that's when they discovered the first victim of what they were termed as the Gilgo Four. And that happened in the last time the victim was uncovered, I think, was April of 2011. And then Heuermann doesn't get arrested until July of 2023. So we have a huge gap there. And talk about dysfunction and everything else that was going on in Suffolk. I mean, you had the head of the police department and the head of the district attorney's office both go to federal prison. So, I mean, geez.
Wait, for what? I don't even know this.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So we'll get into it because it's a mind-boggling situation. You have James Burke, who was the chief of the Suffolk County Police Department, the highest-ranking uniformed member of the department. And you had Thomas Spoda, the district attorney of Suffolk County. Two extremely powerful positions, the two top law enforcement agencies of the counties. They both end up going to federal prison. And what happens is James Burke parks his truck, and he leaves a bag in his car. This local kid who has drug problems breaks into the car and he steals the stuff. And inside the bag was his gun belt, alleged pornography, and some other crazy stuff. And, they find out who it is. They arrest him. And Burke, the police chief, goes there and basically beats him up in front of other witnesses at the precinct. Then the cover-up happens. And the district attorney, who has been protecting Burke for his whole career, because it's a long story, but he had known each other since he was 14. And he had worked this case called the Pius case. Anyway, to make a long story short, the district attorney and his corruption district attorney helped cover up this beating at the Suffolk County Police Station.
Oh my God.
The feds get wind of all this stuff and they do an investigation and they start talking to all these cops, and the cops are like, yep, this happened. And all three of them go to prison, right? So the head of the corruption part, he goes to prison too for covering up this thing. So Suffolk County was an absolute disaster. All right. I mean, an absolute disaster. And this is all going on while the Gilgo Beach investigation is happening. So it actually helped push this off for 12 years. Is it the main reason? Some people say yes. Some people say no. I mean, it is a huge reason why things weren't going on right. But, there's always other things that could have been bubbling below the surface that we are unaware of. This is what we just know of. And that dysfunction proved to be bad in so many ways for this investigation.
So going back to the dates, Lisk is accused of committing these crimes between 93 and 2010, but he was actively communicating with prostitutes up until seemingly right before his arrest. So are there just suspected other bodies that have not been uncovered yet, or do we really think the killing stopped at that point?
Yeah, well, I think if we think that he's just stopped with sex workers, we know that's not true, because just recently, like you said, they came up that he was in contact with, I think, but they said 60 sex workers. 60, not 60, right? So, I mean, talk about off the charts craziness, right? What happened to all those things? I'm sure they're trying to investigate all those interactions. But if you also remember, too, they recovered 50 hotel access keys, right? So not the key, like, the old hotel situation, you actually had a physical key. Now they had those little cards. So they found they call them access keys. So I'm assuming it's those like credit card looking
Yeah.
things. Now, my point is, can they find out which hotels they belong to? The dates, all those things become really important. So to me, that's always been one of those little interesting little tidbits about what they've discovered. But this case has so many working parts and so many different things. Yeah, he was charged with Sandra Costella, which was 1993, and she was found out in North Sea, which is out in Southampton, which is totally way off the beaten path from where Gilgo is, and is also a person. Sandra was also a person that was a victim, was allegedly believed to be another killer, this guy John Bitroff, because it actually happens between two other murders of Colleen McNamee and Rita Tangretti. And she was like actually right in the middle, if I recall correctly. And when that happens, then at the time, Thomas Spoda, who was the district attorney at the time, had stated that they believed Bitroff was responsible, but they just didn't have the evidence because they talked about the way the body was put in a specific way and all the other things that go along with it. And then to find out 12 years later that he has nothing to do with it, and they actually proved this through DNA, and the DNA comes back to, Rex's wife and him, right? There's 2 hair fibers on that case of Sandra Castillo. So the issue that comes down to is that there was so much bad misinformation put out there by the heads of the criminal justice department that this is something that the district attorney is going to try to have to overcome. And he's seeing it in these motions that got put out. The omnibus, the 178 pages worth of the defense motions that basically have the entire case thrown out, and citing some of these different things in there. So it's going to be interesting. Listen, there's a lot of evidence against them, but remember, you only need to have one person in your jury say, yeah, I don't believe it.
Is a case like this a dream for you guys to work or an absolute nightmare?
Oh my God, absolute nightmare. We actually had a serial killer case up in the Bronx Cold Case Squad. And it, by the time we were done, we put it together. It was 4 homicides and 7 sexual assaults. But we didn't have to deal with this social media angle, right? So everybody is like into this kind of stuff. And the issue that really comes down to is that there are so many victims that are just forgotten about in so many different ways that you don't know if some of these cases are connected. And you deal with the kind of the pressure from downtown. That was always where the pressure came from, because they want to solve it. They want this out there because it's a big news story. It's ironic because they never want to say the term serial killer when they're in charge, right? Because that just brings out everybody out of the woodworks. But when Richard Dormer, who was the police commissioner back then, said we might have a serial killer on our hands, and he had an Irish brogue when he said it. I wasn't going to try to imitate him. But when he said that, I almost fell off the couch, because as soon as he said that, I said, "Oh my God, I hope he doesn't realize he just made a huge mistake." Because you have the news now reporting we found the 4th body, we found the 5th body, and now you have the police commissioner himself saying we might have a serial killer on our hands. I'm like, dude, you just opened Pandora's box. And it's like getting the toothpaste out. You can't get it back in. And sure enough, that's what happened. But the media just kind of walked away from it. Just like we saw now with Guthrie. They kind of just walked away from these things. And we're on to the next thing, the war with Iran and all this other stuff that goes on. But for a long time, there was really not much talk on this. And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but since I don't remember how many years I've been doing it now, but I do a radio show in 103.9 FM, Suffolk County. And we were talking about Gil Gold the entire time. And that's how I met Josh Zeman, who did the Killing Season. And we had him on, and Rachel was on, and we were always constantly doing this. We had Bob Kolker, who wrote Lost Girls, and we were doing this for years. And we would say that, why isn't the media, why do they drop this? This is the biggest case in maybe New York State history. And I think a lot of times the media just kind of gave up on it because they thought it was too far gone. And honestly, even at points, I thought it was too far gone.
Well, it's complicated to understand, too. I think about this a lot with the Golden State Killer case in particular, because I'm like, you have this guy who they originally thought was 3 different people, one breaking into houses, one a serial rapist, and then another who's a serial killer. And then to find out that all three of them are connected to one person, it's just overwhelming. And then you don't know who that person is for decades. And then finally you lead to this arrest with the genetic genealogy and everything. It was just, that case was the first one that really blew my mind with with everything going on and having social media and citizen sleuths.
And you know what, though, Maria? I mean, it just goes to show you, too, and this has already been proven ahead of time, and sometimes, people just don't want to deal with it. MOs, the modus operandi, change over time, and they sometimes change the need of the person who's doing it. And that was a big argument about how many killers out in Long Island, how many serial killers. I was a one serial killer person from the beginning. And the reason why I said that, it was somebody who changed his MO because of technology. He had cut up a couple of bodies in the very beginning in some of the earlier cases, 2000, 2001, Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor. I don't remember the exact years and dates, but it was around 2000, 2001, around that time. And then all of a sudden he stopped, and he was just full bodies wrapped in burlap, which we call the Gilgo Four. Those are the first women that they found during their search. And people say, oh, two different killers, way two different MOs. And I'm just like, no. He was picking up girls off the street, Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor. Somebody could have seen them get into a car, and then be able to identify him based on his car, his looks. I mean, listen, you got to remember, now that we know about this guy, he was described as an ogre. He had this huge green pickup truck, right? So there's a reason why he tried to keep his identity under wraps, because how many 6'4", 300 and something pound guys driving around in a green pickup truck, right? So he had a reason to do it. And then he started picking girls up off the internet. So it was totally anonymous. He was using burner phones. And the last document that the prosecution put out, and the district attorney Ray Tierney addressed that and said that at no time ever was the burner phone or his personal phone being used at the same time. And they were pinged right within like a few feet of each other.
Wow.
So, I mean, they have DNA, they have digital forensics, they have so much, and God only knows. I mean, I think the district attorney says there's 3 terabytes of photos and videos, like 100,000 images. And boy, oh boy, this could be, and unfortunately, there's going to be no cameras in the courtroom because New York State doesn't allow them, even though the judge can make an exception. I don't think the judge, Tim Mazie, will. But it's going to be really wild. I think this is going to be insane.
It is really a crazy case. And one of the things I keep going back to with this particular case is how some like real estate agent or someone interviewed him about his job being an architect, like at some point before he was caught, and it came out later after he was caught. And I just can't, the guy just gives off like dork dad vibes. There's nothing that you watch. I don't know, as far as that particular video I saw, that you're like, oh my God, this guy would scare me if he sat next to me on the train. Like, I would know that he was a creepster. He just, it just was very weird to see that he was, you look at him and you're just like, this is the guy that was doing all that. It's just weird.
Well, we talk about that with Koberger a lot because we're just like, his eyes say it all, right? Like
he's
the
so
eyes,
scary.
the
He
eyebrows,
scares
he's so
the shit
scary
out of me.
looking.
Yeah, and the ironic part is I lived only 2 towns from this guy, and I took the same Long Island Railroad train to and from work in the city. And I all the times I took the train, I mean, thousands of times I've been on the train, and I never saw this guy, which is weird because you get to see so much. But here's the thing about the Long Island Railroad: you have people that, like, I'm going to sit in a specific car in a specific seat, and God help somebody if they're sitting in my seat when I get there. And so that's, you kind of pick your own train car where you're going to sit, because you pick it the closest that you have to, so you don't have to walk as far. But the issue it comes down to is I never saw this guy on the train, but there were so many things that pointed to Massapequa Park. They had the triangle that was done for the pings on the phones, all kinds of crazy stuff.
All right, let's finish up with Justin Timberlake. What'd you think of did you see the videos that just got released that he was trying really hard not to have released?
Yeah. And here's where my biggest complaint comes in. The ACLU and so many anti-cop people and organizations wanted the police to wear body cams. And when this thing first came out, I'm like, let's do it. Because they're like, oh, the police are bad actors and we're going to keep the police straight and this and that. We have seen just the opposite of that. And that's why I was a proponent of these from the beginning. And I was on the record saying, we are going to see how bad the public acts. We're going to see people confess to crimes right on the video, and their lawyers are going to be like, what the hell do you want me to do with this? Right? It is winning cases for law enforcement. It's showing the cops are almost always working in a professional capacity, doing what they're supposed to be doing. Yes, there's been a couple of instances that have gone bad, and rightly so. People, cops lose their jobs or they get arrested, whatever. Okay, I don't have any issue with that. But the issue that I had problems with is that his lawyer was trying to have the body cam footage like thrown out totally. You didn't want this thing released at all. Then when they lost that, then they said, well, we're gonna have to redact certain things, and we're gonna do. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You can't have your cake and say to yourself, what I'm gonna pick and choose what I want. It's not gonna do that. So you have a situation where I watched the video and I'm chuckling during this whole thing because he's like, oh, you guys are doing a great job. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I only had one martini, So he's making these spontaneous utterances, which are 100% admissible in court, because as long as the cops aren't asking you questions, and these things happen, especially when somebody is under the influence, they kind of say things that they're not supposed to. He couldn't pass any of the sobriety tests. He actually said during the video that these are extremely hard. Yeah, walking in a straight line. Yeah, Justin, extremely hard.
I love the part where he gets pulled over by a cop, and then I'm just thinking from a cop is working at night, obviously totally sober, walks up to the window and opens the thing and is like, "Are you from here? No. Why are you in town? Oh, I'm on a world tour." The guy was probably like, "What? This guy's
He
out
actually
of
said,
his
a
mind."
world tour for what?
And why couldn't he explain, I'm a singer? And then he was like, I'm Justin Timberlake. And the cop's like, yeah, let me see your driver's license.
Yeah, I thought that was
Oh
classic.
my God.
Yeah, and actually the cop has been getting some press on that, because basically he wasn't impressed. He didn't recognize him. And you know what? The cop did exactly what you're supposed to do. Like, at this point, I don't care who you are. If you're driving under the influence of drug, and apparently he makes was he making an illegal U-turn? I don't remember exactly how he even came across him. Anyway, he wasn't taking any of the Justin Timberlake world tour. He goes, a world tour for what?
That was amazing.
It was great.
Yeah, because now we're going to see, because the cop was younger, I think in his mid-20s, so he's like, I didn't recognize him. But regardless, even the friend that came up later was like, can't you do a favor because you love Bye 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 or one of his songs? And it's like, we can't just do favors for people because you like their music. Like, this cop was acting so professional in every aspect of it. And I think they originally pulled him over because he blew a stop sign and then he was just completely driving in the left lane at some point.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
And if it was me, I would have probably had a little sarcastic comment to that when he would have said, don't you like Bye Bye Bye? I'd be like, yeah, we are going to do Bye 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 soon. When we drop him off at the central booking, we're going to go Bye Bye Bye.
Have you ever had, because I know, I guess towards the end of your career, you weren't pulling people over for stuff like that. But like when you were a cop, like an original cop, when you started, did you ever have people just try to drop that, like, oh, I'm connected, or I know so-and-so?
Oh, God, yeah. Don't you know who I am?
Yeah.
No, that's why I asked you for your driver's license. And it was actually, there's a great line from, I think, Southland or South. It was a TV show about LA cops.
Oh, okay.
And the guy says to him, don't you know who my father is? And he goes, why, your mother didn't tell you? So you could see a New York cop or an LA cop saying something like that. So yes, sarcasm is always, I would say it's one of my best traits. But yeah, no, I didn't. You always have people going, don't you know who I am? I'm the councilman's this, that, and the other thing. Be like, okay, great. You could take it up with him or her then.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Because you're not doing them any favors letting them get away with a DUI. Because then, it always hurts somebody else.
Well, could you imagine, like, and a lot of times, if you're going to give somebody a break, right, it's usually doing for a summons, right? They went through a stop sign or they went through something like that. If you're going to give somebody a break, remember, it's up to the discretion of the cop to do so. But when you have somebody committing a crime like DWI, God forbid you let him or her go, and then 10 minutes later they drive through a red light and kill somebody, and now you're on record as stopping them and you didn't do nothing, you're opening yourself up to losing your job, getting sued, all those things going with it. So you're not getting that break when it comes to something like that. If it was just a stop sign or a red light thing, you could say, okay, dude, just slow it down and, just get it. Because you do that with normal people.
Yeah.
Cops hate writing summonses, folks. I'm telling you, we hate it. We don't want to go to court. We don't want to do this. And we know that people are mostly good people, or do they did something bad, meaning like they sped. Well, listen, it happens. So my thing was, if I walked up to your car and you said, I license registration, you passed that red light by. It wasn't red, it was yellow. You know what? You're getting the summons now. You're telling me I'm a liar and I'm making this all up. You know what? No, but if you say, listen, my wife's driving me crazy, my kid got in trouble, and you can say to yourself, okay, I've been there. I got it. As long as you don't have any warrants, we'll let you on your way. And
I usually just cry. I usually cry and it usually works.
I've been pulled over once in my whole life. You just get pulled over all the time. So that's your fault.
My husband gets pulled over all the time for speeding. Like, we go on these big road trips, so it's like amazing if we could get
Every
away
other
with
month.
one ticket. But really, we've only had 2 negative interactions with cops that you're just the one guy, I was just like, he reminded me of like Cartman on South Park when he was just like, you will respect my authority. Like, I was like, why is this guy so mad right now? And then the other guy was recent when I was down in Atlanta with Cheryl. I was teaching with Cheryl, and this guy pulls us over, and he has like some machine, and he's testing the tint on our windows to see.
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, I never saw this tool. Like, people in New Jersey at least don't get pulled over for stuff anymore. Like tint. That's like,
tint meters were a big thing.
oh my God. And it just was funny. I was like, dude, relax. Just,
I guess.
We do know that the state police in Georgia don't play.
No, that guy was so mad. And I was just like, well, and it's true. Like, I had skin cancer and stuff. So I was like, I do have tint because like my skin's really sensitive to the sun and everything, but I didn't ever go through the process to get the, because I just don't feel like it. But yeah, it was that guy. I was like, take a day off, bro. You're a little bit angry here. But
I guess one last question I have for you is that the police department is getting a lot of criticism for releasing the footage. Like, do they have to release this footage?
No, but what happens is I guess you could say if it benefits the police department in so many aspects, right? So, what the lawyers are saying or what the person is saying kind of dictates that, right? If they're saying, oh, the cops didn't do it, I wasn't drunk, I wasn't this, be like, okay, here it is.
Let the public
Here it is.
decide.
Yeah, and I'm for them releasing this because we've been talking about DUIs a lot recently, especially with the Johnny Gaudreau case that happened in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And this guy trying to get it dropped saying he was under the legal limit. But my argument is always like, I am somebody like Justin Timberlake. If I have one martini, I should not drive my car because I am impaired.
Well, we all know what we shouldn't do, right? And getting behind the wheel, even if you had one drink, shouldn't be done in regards to this. And listen, Long Island has had a long history of problems with DWI. I mean, it has been a phenomenon that I couldn't understand, but over the last 40 years of watching what's going on and living there and doing all this stuff, they have a big problem with DWI, and there's been always a lot of enforcement. So and that's why there's kind of almost like a zero tolerance policy in some of these things. So you're Justin Timberlake, we don't care. We have such a problem on our roads because Long Island roads are dangerous as it is. They're all windy, they're narrow, and they're very unforgiving because we have these stone bridges, right? So if you hit one of those, man, lights out. It's not. It doesn't forgive. Let's put it that way. So there's been a lot of issues with that, and they've been cracking down for decades, and it never seems to make a dent. So I don't feel sorry for him in the least.
It's weird to me too that a person that's worth, $60 or $80 million just doesn't have a driver. Like, what, you rented a car and you're driving the car. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah, I guess, I've thought about that too, but I also think about too that because of their fame and fortune, they kind of get out of the thing that normal people do every
Yeah.
day, like going to the store, driving a car, right? You kind of lose all this. So a lot of times people think, oh, I wish I was famous, this and that. I'm like, I don't know, because you really can't do. Was it the stories of Michael Jackson used to have to close down an entire mall just to go shopping so he
Yeah.
could go in and do
Wow.
something that you and I would take for granted. So, I guess maybe that might be the answer to it. But you know what? Yes, if you're going to drink and you're going to a big party, get an Uber. I mean, God.
I know it is really easy now. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. We are going to see you in a couple weeks when we do
Yeah,
our
looking
event
forward to it.
together.
Yeah, April 11th, you're going to be joining us for our live show in Horsham.
Yeah,
Do
that's
you
going to
have
be fun. We got Scott Duffey coming too, right? So
Yeah.
we're all going to get a chance to hang
The
out
whole
together
crew.
again.
Yeah, it's
which
gonna
is
be
which is
fun.
pretty cool.
Yeah, we're going to raise some money for the summer program at Center for Forensic Research and Education. So I think we're going to have a really good time. Do you have any hints of what you're going to be lecturing on, or you don't know yet?
Yeah, I'm going to probably talk about some of the way the forensics in the cold cases are, because as part of my former life, I used to do a lot of cold case stuff. So I think it's kind of exciting about some of the new technology that I wish we had back then, and maybe some of the ways that I would be approaching some of these cases today.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Please tell everybody where they could follow you.
Sure. I'm on my YouTube channel is True Crime with the Sarge. I actually have an audio podcast now too, True Crime with the Sarge, the audio files. And you could josephgiacalone.com is my website, but I'm pretty much out there, and I try to respond to almost every comment or question that I can, but sometimes it gets a little overwhelming.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you. Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.